So how confident are you feeling at the moment about this referendum?
I'm feeling good about it. I think the big ship's pointed in the right direction, and I'm just feeling the screws really, the torque, it's turning, and it's turning towards yes.
I want to ask you about what happens in the event of a no vote. Is there any other type of constitutional recognition that you think might fly?
We're not contemplating any other result other than the recognition of Indigenous peoples as the first peoples of Australia. That's what's before us now. That's what's passed the Parliament. I'm not contemplating any other scenario other than us driving towards a successful adoption.
So those who say there'd be some other simpler type of
Of course, people are going to create distractions, right? It's like we're about to enter the third quarter of the grand final, and we're feeling good, and somebody wants to play another game somewhere else. I'm not into that. We're all into this business. We're going to finish the game we're in. It's a 15-year-old game, you know, and we're in the last quarter here. We're about, as soon as the Prime Minister tells us the date, we will be into the last quarter.
But I guess Australians need to know, don't they, what's at stake here?
Oh,
It's this or
everything is at stake. This is the most important vote we'll ever have in 200 years. Because originally, when the first fleet sailed into Sydney Harbour and the British confronted the Indigenous, the answer was, what do we do about these people who are already here? The answer was no. And in 1901, when the nation was created and the Constitution was installed, the answer was no. We now got a chance to say yes. Yes to the pre-existence of the first peoples of Australia. And that's why the provision says, in recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first peoples of Australia. And we're not playing any other game than the recognition of Indigenous people as first peoples.
We've heard a lot from the Prime Minister and others here at Garma about the practical benefits that the voice will be able to deliver. You're someone who's been there from the get-go on this whole idea. How does it deliver those practical benefits?
Because in order to have empowerment, in order to have what the left calls self-determination, what the Aboriginal Rights Cause has called self-determination. When you unpack that, what is self-determination? It's rights and responsibilities. And when we finally are allowed to take responsibility for our future, for our day-to-day living, for our children, for closing the gap, once we take responsibility for it in partnership with government, that's when change will happen.
Just tease that out for us, because that's really interesting. You're saying this is a moment where Indigenous Australians will be able to take greater responsibility.
We're going to take back responsibility.
Right.
We're going to take back the responsibility that the welfare state, that the colonial state took away from us. We will have the dignity of making our own choices and owning our own choices.
For better or worse.
For better or worse. In the future, when we have the Closing the Gap speech at the start of Parliament every year, accountability for those results will rest with us and the government as partners. In the past, it's always been, we haven't made progress with closing the gap. It's the government's fault. Well, once we adopt the voice and we're in partnership with the government and the Parliament, the responsibility will be both of ours. It'll be on our shoulders if we're making progress or not in closing the gap.
What have you made of Peter Dutton's tactics the past week talking treaty?
Well, as I say, there's going to be distractions. If you read the actual provision, the actual provision that's passed to the Parliament, there's no mention of treaty. This is about the voice. Let's climb one big mountain at a time.
So what's this about?
This is about recognising Indigenous people as the first peoples of Australia. It's recognising that there shall be a body. That's the solemn promise in this amendment. we're going to vote as an Australian people to adopt the words, "There shall be a body to be called the Voice." And that voice will have the function of making representations to the Parliament and the government on matters affecting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Not nuclear submarines, not parking tickets, not whatever. It's going to be about matters affecting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people.
Some years ago, Noel Pearson, here at Garma, you talked about treaty being the second door. The Voice, you said, was the first door. That's still your view?
As I say, yeah, one mountain at a time.
So what if that first door doesn't open?
Well, nothing happens.
No treaty?
Everything fails if we don't get the voice. The fact of the matter is that this status quo is not just, it's not just 26 years old since 1996. This status quo has been going on for 2 centuries. And we remain in a world of the status quo as long as we don't have a voice and an equal responsibility for our own future.
But as someone who's been heavily involved in those Uluru dialogues as well, you know that agreement making and truth telling was a big part of what Indigenous Australians asked for.
Absolutely, but we also understand that in every political process we win one battle at a time. You know, the proposition we're faced with now is a proposition to install the voice in the Constitution. You could not cut out a bigger job than the one we have before us, getting the voice up. And, you know, Dutton, the media, any commentators, they can say, well, let's pile another, you know, ton of lead on top of the donkey's back, or, you know, make the next mountain ahead of us the challenge. In fact, we have a mountain before us. It's a very steep mountain. We need a majority of voters in a majority of the states. I believe we can get there, but let's focus on the summit ahead, and that summit is a successful referendum.
We've heard you talk just finally in the past about what it would mean if Australia votes no. What if Australia votes yes? Noel Pearson, what will that mean?
Oh, you know,
for you?
It'll be a bright new day for the country, for our children, but not just them. It'll be a bright day for all Australian children of the future, because those kids are going to grow up in an Australia that I never grew up in. I grew up in an Australia where I was uncertain about my place in the country, whereas our children and grandchildren are going to grow up in an Australia where there's absolutely no doubt we are Australians here, and we're recognised in the constitution of the country as the descendants of the First Peoples.
Noel Pearson, good to talk to you. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, David.